Can you feel that? It feels like we're getting to that point where we're going to start seeing a lot of rumors around the next PlayStation, which we assume will be called the PlayStation 5 or the PS5, and the next Xbox, which we don't really have a name for yet. We just know it's codenamed Scarlett, and then there's also other ones like Anaconda, for example, and Lockhart. There's a lot of code names on Microsoft's side, actually. Now, this is another rumor wave for today. Earlier today, we talked about Google's new system that they're currently working on internally that has a code name, Metallurgy. So you can go check that one out as well if you missed it. We're actually going to go over a rumor that has been circulating heavily right now. And it's interesting because it at least talks a bit about, I guess, the potential specs of the next Xbox. Now, of course, we know that there are multiple models of the next Xbox that appear to be being worked on right now. Whether that means that one's going to be a streaming box and one's just going to be an actual local hardware box that doesn't require a server to play the games at a certain frame rate or resolution or anything. This is a leak that was put out there on Reddit and then it was deleted. However, it looks like people not only managed to capture the Reddit post, which I'll actually quickly show you as well, but we did also have WCCF Tech actually pick it up, summarize it, and then also put it against a member on Reset Era by the name of HMQQ that actually worked to confirm some of it. Now, over at Reset Era, they were verified. So I've looked into that a little further, and that just means that the person who's sharing this information is in a position, I guess, in their day-to-day life where they would actually be privy to some of this information. That doesn't necessarily mean that they work at Microsoft or that someone like Phil Spencer. It's just somebody that the administration there has at least verified is in some way connected to Microsoft or Xbox or the next project in some way. That means that they could know a developer. That means that they could actually be working on parts of it. They could work at AMD for all we know. But I figure we take a look at this. So the Reddit leak. Here is a very long list that somebody managed to grab from, I guess this is on Imager. And let me scroll down here. This is what they shared. Next Xbox, everything you need to know today. And if we scroll down here further, they say they want to share some new info. And when I was reading down this, I realized they have a lot of information. Like they have, like, this would have to be, if it's not, this would have to be Phil Spencer, if anything. And it's like, I don't think Phil Spencer is going on Reddit to put all the info out there. So I was a bit skeptical because a lot of times what happens with these rumors is someone finds out one or two things and they mix in just a bunch of stuff that might not be true and probably isn't true, but it's always interesting to look at these. And I was more interested in the hardware anyway and the specs, but the Microsoft Studio acquisitions that they seem to be pointing to, again, sounds like a grab bag and kind of a guess on their end. But the big ones I see here, IO Interactive, Platinum Games, even Turtle Rock Studios, I think even Blue Point Games. I think the big one here, though, would be Platinum Games. If they said that they had acquired Platinum Games, I think that is one of those acquisitions that would send ripples through the gaming community. That would be a big one, but we'd have to see if that would actually happen. And again, this could just be a list that they have essentially made up and said, hey, look, studios, they're going to try to acquire them. Oh, they didn't come true. Oh, well, talks broke down or something. No, I don't see any proof. In fact, the only thing I've ever seen is that Platinum Games isn't interested in being purchased. And they had that whole thing with like Scalebound where it seemed like they were butting heads a lot and the whole project vaporized. So I feel like they're not excited to work together, or I don't think Platinum Games is excited to be bought by Microsoft, so I don't know about that one. Anyway, next Xbox. So they have attempted to list both Xboxes, Lockhart and Anaconda. They've attempted to list the prices and the seemingly, I guess, the launch window. That's a lot of info, like I said, for a random person to know. But here we are. The streaming one, codenamed Lockhart, is 8-core, 16-thread Zen 2 CPU, which would, of course, as their custom Navi setup for the GPU at just over 4 teraflops, or 4 plus teraflops. Memory at 12 gigabytes DDR6. I don't know why the streaming box would need that much memory. I don't even think it'd have to be a 4 plus teraflop system. I think it would get away fine because it's a streaming box to be as powerful as the current Xbox One is now. In fact, I have a theory that they're going to turn the older Xbox One systems into streaming boxes with an update. That's the theory I have right now. The most interesting thing here, next to the ray tracing that we're going to talk about as well, is the storage. This, if true, and we're going to talk a bit about why this is going to be a focal point and why it appears like it might actually be true, would replace probably the biggest weakness to the Xbox in terms of hardware outside of its CPU, which obviously everyone's calling for. No one really talks about the mechanical hard drive in the Xbox because that is kind of an issue. I mean, it's a mechanical drive. Of course, mechanical drives are slower and they are also prone to failure. It's not uncommon for a mechanical drive to fail, and the problem with that is it's internal to the Xbox One, meaning if it fails, it's not like the PlayStation 4 where you switch the hard drive out. You can't actually get to it easily, and if you do, there's actually a lot of stuff you have to go through in order to make it work. Sometimes it's just impossible. So seeing something like a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD is pretty neat. I think that'd be a good thing to have. I was a little surprised to see that because at face value, that feels like a very expensive thing. However, we've seen just NVMe drives, as in the M.2 form factor, for example, drop down in price pretty well to the point where you can get a fairly large one now, like a 1 terabyte to a consumer with the M.2 socket and everything for like $130 to $140. And again, that sounds expensive, but if you start removing things like the socket and they maybe solder the chips and everything, the controller to the board, they probably could get this out there. Again, though, I'm a bit confused about the storage on this one because if it's a streaming box, I don't know why it needs a way to store that much in terms of space. On this says I don't know why you would need that. It's weird. Ray tracing is would be another big thing there that I think a lot of people would be excited about, and we'll talk a bit why. If it was on the console, it would be a very impressive thing, and it helped obviously push the technique forward. The Anaconda is again an 8-core 16-thread Zen 2 CPU with a custom Navi 12 plus teraflop GPU. Not surprising there. 16 gigabytes of GDDR6, and we are seeing GDDR6 used here, and that makes sense because AMD has mentioned that Navi would be using GDDR6 and HBM2, like they'll have the option between them. But if you are mass manufacturing systems like Sony and Microsoft would, I get why you would lean into GDDR6, although HBM2, I guess, technically uses less power, and it can, of course, have very large amounts of bandwidth. GDDR6 appears to be the next, like, I guess, just accepted form of memory for video cards going forward, and we see Samsung and Hynix and I believe all kinds of other companies starting to mass produce it. It seems like it's going to be much more readily available and probably cheaper at a manufacturing level than HBM2. There's been a lot of talk about Samsung even talking about how it's too expensive. Samsung puts the crunch on emerging HBM2 market. This was actually in January of last year, and it hasn't gotten that much better. A little bit better, but not much, to where it's expensive, and they don't see it having any kind of future in the consumer space. And these are consumer devices that we're talking about here. So again, looking at this 1 terabyte NVMe, it seems like the biggest difference is, of course, that GPU, and that makes sense, as even if you look at things like the Xbox One to the Xbox One S, the CPU stays the same minus a slight overclock on the X, of course, to keep just pretty much things straightforward when it comes to AI and game logic and everything. So here we are with the GPU that is obviously going to be the heaviest, or the top heavy part. It's going to be a large GPU strapped to, in this case, a more moderate CPU, because right now it is a large GPU strapped to a laptop processor. So I would like to see Zen 2 being used in there as CPU, and an 8-core 16-thread, it'd be a much bigger jump for the CPU, if anything. So why are we talking about this? Well, it came to light that on Reset Era, a person, like I said, HMQQ, that was verified to some extent by the administration there, went through and said that the hardware is partially true. Again, I'm not surprised. I feel like if they had any real information, some of it might be correct, and then the rest of it might just be them guessing. Storage is true, which is the part that, again, surprised me, because that is one of the weakest parts on the Xbox, is that mechanical 2.5-inch laptop drive that's inside your Xbox right now. Ray tracing is true, also a big one, because if ray tracing is true, then that means that developers will have more of a reason to actually use ray tracing in their games, because they know that there will be X million amounts of systems out there that can actually use it, whereas not everyone is jumping at the chance to upgrade to a 2080 or a 2070 or a 2060. There's a lot of people who are sticking with their 1080s that will never turn on ray tracing, at least for the next year or two. So if these systems come out and all of a sudden, after the first 24 hours, like they all seem to, sells out and boom, there's a million units on the market that can do ray tracing, I think it'll be really cool to see that push the technique forward and actually be used in games, etc. Whether you think it looks better or you don't really see a difference or anything, it's a cool technique, and I think it would work to evolve over time, especially if there is an actual audience for it. Which, hey, I mean, it's not uncommon for the console market to push techniques like these forward, which is pretty cool. They say Lockhart is not a streaming box. I don't see why a streaming box would need those kind of specifications, so that's not shocking. That alone seems like overkill for a streaming box. The Xbox SoC codename is Anubis. Check AMD's plan. Okay, that's cool. MSAI is not a part of the hardware. In other words, never heard of TPU or ASIC like it, so it seems like that might just be something that they kind of threw in there or pulled from documentation on something else. And they say how to implement ray tracing, see GDC 2019, and why they make a decision like Lockhart, see GDC 2019, and why there's still no dev kit after GDC 2019. Okay, so there we go. GDC 2019 seems to be the common denominator there. But if things like the NVMe SSD is true with 1 gigabytes per second, that would be impressive, and I think that'd be a massive jump for the storage and transfer speeds. I do think 1 terabyte for a 4K is still kind of small, but they do, of course, give us the option to plug in an external drive like we have with the Xbox One X and the Xbox One. So at least there is an upgrade path, and you never know, we could get introduced with a 2 terabyte model for people who want to spend more money. They will just have to drop more chips on there and make it all work. But I like the idea of ray tracing being a part of the next generation, mostly because I said it would probably help to push the technique forward. But looking at this is not unreasonable. An 8-core, 16-thread Zen 2 CPU being attached to a custom Navi at 12 teraflops. Again, we're still waiting for AMD to unveil Navi to the point where we know what we can buy at a consumer level, but I would not at all be shocked, I don't think anyone else would, to have Navi, because GDR6 will probably be used, and we have to wait for Navi for that to become readily available. So a launch like I was thinking would be in 2020, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a holiday. It could be earlier 2020. We saw Nintendo launch their system with no problem at all. So maybe Sony and Microsoft saw that and they said, hey, we don't have to launch in the holiday. In fact, if we launch earlier on in the year, we can then get our production pretty much sorted out and be ready at holiday rather than have shortages at holiday, which always seems to be the case. But this was an interesting rumor to go over because it is people talking about specifications for the next Xbox. As for the PlayStation, they basically said, I know about the next PlayStation, but I mean, why would you know about the next PlayStation and the next Xbox? Even if you work at AMD, I doubt this information is just around on whiteboards and you walk around and say, okay, that's the PS5, that's the Xbox, the next Xbox. I don't think that's the case. But would I be surprised if it was also an 8-core, 16-thread, but a Navi at 8 teraflops plus? I don't believe that. I know they might want to come in at that $400 price, but we've heard several times that Mark Cerny, for example, and others kind of pointed to the Xbox One X being too weak for 4K native, and they weren't wrong, but they kept pointing out 8 to 10 teraflops to get you there. So I don't think they would settle for the low end. I think they would settle for the higher end. However, I could see them, believe it or not, going with something like 12 gigabytes of GDDR6. I don't think that's out of question. So let me know what you guys think about this situation here when it comes to the rumors of next generation hardware. I like this time when we're getting up to the reveals of them, because we try to see what little bits of information. It was like this with the Switch, and it was fun, and we'll see, I guess, what the Xbox, the next Xbox and PlayStation 5 have for us. Hopefully this year. Leading into the E3, I would expect something from Microsoft, whether it's just an idea of what they're bringing to the table. I don't think they're going to show up with a spec sheet, but they could say, oh, it's going to have Navi in it, it's going to have Zen 2 in it, or something, something like that. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you guys like the video. If you liked it, dislike. If not, guys, I'll see you tomorrow morning for Newswave.